Yeah. Late night, late night. Yo, yo, peace, y'all. Peace. Barghani Islam. Salam Hetipu. Rahubat. Gino Lakum Ni Nani. Chief Noble Bandele Elamine. Back again. And we late night. We on some late night stuff, man. I do my best work at night in the witching hours. So please check out, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. But tonight, this morning, we're gonna get into the the fact that the United States was not a Christian nation, like everybody believes it is. The United States was not founded on Christian principles. And so we're going to look into that tonight. But before we get into that, um, please check out any of my books that are on Amazon. Okay, look up Bandele Elamine, Moorish Treaties, Nationality, Moorish Treaties, History with Moorish Moabite, the birth certificate, all that, okay? Got a Blake journal, so if you guys want to write things down and have a journal, we got an Afrocentric black journal, Afrocentric blank journal for your need. All right, and like I said, all my books. Check out some on Amazon. All right. So, with that being said, let's get into this video, man. So, a lot of times, me and my brother King Elbay, we often go back and forth about this topic when we're discussing Christianity being the religion of the United States. And so, like, people often just think that the United States was super Christian, right? Because, you got the Puritans that came here, the Quakers, all these different people that left Europe to come to America so that they could have the right to do what they wanted to. So it's like a lot of Christian groups that came here and settled. And so, because of that, we think that America is a Christian nation. But we often look at how America democracy and republic is set up. It's set up with church and state being separated. And so that should be right there a sign that America was not necessarily developed by Christianity, okay? United States has other esoteric things going on that created it, okay? So we gonna get into that tonight, okay? Like I said, like the video, please share, subscribe, whatnot, okay? Um, Let me take this off. You guys want to let's see, put my number up if it pulls up, man. Everything be moving slow. But if you want to get contact, please contact me 513-486-6115. If you want to do any, like, we do a lot of work. If you want to get my books, you can call me. I can send them directly to you. If you need legal, like jurisprudence, you want to talk law, you want to talk and discuss law. I'm not a lawyer, but if you want to talk and we can discuss law and things, you can give me a call. If you need assistance with affidavits, you can give me a call. Um, if you are just trying to get an understanding of certain principles like birth certificates and this and that and why we don't need it, you can always get the book, but you can give me a call. So, and you can also become a member of the Temple of New Kemet. So, with that being said, I know I'm running my mouth. With that being said, let's get into this. So, when we're talking about America, we can't go past our founding fathers, right? So, when we talk about the United States, the founding fathers have to be mentioned with the United States. The number one founding father we all know is George Washington. He's like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. Those are what we call the founding fathers. Those are the most prominent, the most prominent founding fathers. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at, hopefully if I can get my screen share to act right. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you some of the things that were going on back in colonial time, right? Because really they were not Christian. Okay, the country was not really a Christian nation. Let's see. All right, let me share screen this, right? Let's share screen. Boom, boom. Let's see if I can do Windows. All right, we're going to share the screen. Share the screen. All right, so what? Okay, so let's say, was America an early, let's see, can y'all see this? All right, so was early American a Christian nation, a Christian America? See, that's a question. It says right here, okay, always been a debate for some quarter over whether America was born a Christian nation. And it's ironic. The historical record shows that America was not born Christian, but grew to that way. Okay? Grew to be very Christian centuries later. Okay, so some religious right activists believe that were to be accepted as a fact that pre 1800s, right? Americans were deeply Christian. A new light would be cast on current debates about where, if anywhere, to draw a line between church and state today. In a sense of the Supreme Court search for the originalist interpretations of the Constitution, Christian dogma would be the originalist justification, okay, for saying to reintroducing prayer in the schools, right? So, like, I want y'all to understand this. We be talking about prayer in school, and hold up. Like we be talking about prayer in school, right? And we think about prayer in school. Hold on, let me check it out. We think about prayer in school as something that's always been in school. Okay, peace, peace, heat wave. Stay blessed too, my brother. Peace and love, right? I just want to, like I said, there's some things that really have to be explained. And like I said, when we're looking at Christianity, we often look at Christianity from today's perspective. When we look at America, America seems to be predominant Christian. People go to church. Uh, there's a lot of political stuff going on in Christianity. You got a whole, like Republicans with the conservative side of Christianity is very dominant. So when we look around today, we see a dominant Christianity. But like we said, the early Christians did not look at it like that. So so let's get back into it, right? So they're saying that the impression of great piety among settlers is a common view of the past, probably rooted in an outsized role that the Puritans play in our mental pictures of early America, right? The Puritans, however, were an odd lot in America, it says. It says that the exception, not the rule. There are a prominent exceptions thanks to the cultural power of their New England descendants. Okay, so it says that over a wider American landscape, however, listen, colonialists were notably unchurched and unchristian. Okay, they scattered around in separate households, unlike the Puritans who concentrated in villages. Right. It says most Americans had no church to go to and little connection to what we would call organized religion. Even where there were churches to attend, many went either irregularly or simply because the church was one of the rare places, along with the tavern, to see people in a sparsely developed society. Okay, so look, so let's get into that. Okay, so the early settlers of America were not interested in Christianity. Okay, the picture that we have of America when we get American history is painted from like a Puritan perspective. Okay, you know, these small groups of people coming from Europe coming to America to allegedly escape Catholicism, right? We know Catholicism is a major like enemy of the state, right? That plays into part why the founding fathers who came here and wanted to separate from Britain and all that, they didn't want religion dominant because as free thinking people, they began to be like, we don't need religion because it's dogmatic and it seemed to oppress progression. It had suppressed the ability for people to progress scientifically and technologically in a lot of ways. And so I think the free thinking people of America, predominantly Freemason thinking, was against it. Now, what I want to do is I want to look at our main founding father, okay? And I want to look at what he talked about. So, like, these are just quotes from George Washington, okay? Quotes about the separation of church and state. George Washington, I'm going to tell you right now, George Washington was for church separation of church and state. He was not a religious man. And see, and this is part of the thing. We got the founding father. Now, think about this, y'all. Think about this. If George Washington talked like he did then, if he talked like that today, he probably wouldn't be president because today's presidents predominantly have to show an allegiance to Christian religion. If you're not a Christian, they're going to use that against you. Perfect example, Barack Obama. You know, many on the right and conservatives tried to paint him as a Muslim, which would have been bad. Even though you can be whatever religion you want to be president, you don't have to be Christian. But the unspoken rule is you got to be Christian, right? So let us look at some of the quotes that George Washington talked about with church and state. I hope you guys can see this, right? Okay, so there was a few, right? I'm going to find the ones that, okay, like this one. George Washington said, I beg you, be persuaded that no one would be more zealous than myself to establish effectual barriers against the horrors of spiritual tyranny and every species of religious persecution. So just take that in, man. Like, he, spirit, George Washington understood the the damage that the Catholic Church had done to Western society. It had become a like a monster. I mean, they would if you didn't believe in Catholicism and you didn't believe in God the way that they practice God, I mean, they would ostracize. They would hang you, kill you. They would put you on house arrest. You know, we've talked about this before. Okay, so look. Where's the other one? Where's the other one? It's a good one. It was no more than television. Okay, let's hold on. It's coming. It's coming. Okay, we have abundant reason to rejoice that in this land, look, think about how he looked at this land. He's George Washington called it the land of light, of truth, and reason. So he said we're living in this land of light, of truth, and reason. So right there, he's making a distinction from Europe. He's making this distinction from Europe to express that Europe is entangled and has a stronghold of superstition, right? So look, he says that America is the land of reason and truth, right? And it has triumphed over the power of bigotry, right? And superstition. Now, this is a sidebar, but when he talks about bigotry and superstition, the Catholic Church, I'm gonna always keep telling y'all, the Catholic Church is the ones who created the racism that we see today. The bigotry, the racism against other races of people. The Catholic Church is the one who created that division amongst Christian people versus people outside of Europe and Christianity. They deemed them as something less than. So George Washington, as a free thinker, Freemason, right, talks about that. Now check this out. It says right here, and that every person that here worship God, if listen, that every person may here worship God. Listen, according to the dictates of his own heart. So I mean, once again, he's taking and going on strike against Catholicism, saying that you worship your God according to what you dictate in your heart. Okay. Now it says, in this enlightened age, you see, and in this land of equal liberty, it is our boast. So he's boasting and bragging that a man's religious tenets will not forfeit the protection of the laws, nor deprive him of the right of attaining and holding the highest offices that are known in the United States. So come on, man. That right there goes against everything that we would imagine in today's time. Like George Washington saying that, I mean, it would be an uproar amongst conservatives. Now think about it. Like if not Ray, if George Washington was president today, he was rich, these things, I would say that he probably would be leaning on the Republican side, right? And if he was a Republican running as a Republican, he probably would need conservatives for him to win. This don't sound conservative, right? At all. He's very open to the worship of God in an abstract perception. So, like I said, these quotes is showing me that George Washington was not necessarily looking at trying to make the United States a Christian nation. He wanted the nation to be where anybody with any religious beliefs could come here and have the protection of the law. And he wanted the separation of law. Okay. This was a new concept, I guess, in a lot of ways, because the church, Islam, all them, they collaborated religious law with the law of the land. And you can see this like even in the Bible. You know, like the Bible, the law of Moses was the law of the land for the people. And so I think this way of religion being the dominant force of law, that these free thinking in this new enlightened age, a lot of them was not on that. You see, you had a lot of Freemasons, and I will say this: the concept of that all our forefathers were Masons. I'm not here to say that either. There were probably like a third of the people that were like the founding fathers. I'm gonna say like a third of the founding fathers were Mason, but they were important. Okay, just like for example, George Washington is a very widely known Mason. I mean, the man always got his apron on, right? Always showing off. The 4th of July is based on the star Sirius rising, similar to how in Egypt the star Sirius rises. Okay, so a lot of the things that they did, the people who had the power, they had the Masons would put that and incorporate that into American history. So we got the 4th of July, really a Masonic kind of code, right? We got the first president of the United States, a Mason, a Freemason. They said like 13 out of 39 of the people that signed the Constitution, 13 of them were Masons. Okay. So Masons did have a part to play in that. So look, if we look, you know, they say many Americans celebrate our founding father, and all they did was to help create our country. What few of them know is that many of the founding fathers were also Freemasons. Some of them more notable than others, right? But we know George Washington, of course, Ben Franklin lead the Philadelphia chapter. Paul Revere, that's another thing. They always talk about Paul Revere. They say that Paul Revere, he was the one that told them the Redcoats was coming, right? But they said that he was not the one that did most of the riding. Like Paul Revere only went like a mile or two, where the other guy had rolled like, several miles. And then Paul Revere took the last couple of miles, but he gets the credit. Is it because he's a Freemason? I'm not going to get into that, but, But it says that even John Hancock, Chief Justice John Marshall. So these people that shaped American history, a lot of them were Freemasons. They were, I'm not going to say that all Freemasons believe the church and state separate, but Masons, a lot of the Masons were free thinking, right? They were in this age where their understanding of God was a lot more abstract, and they began to think about God in a bigger picture. It wasn't necessarily connected to Jesus. Like, if you look at it, like, they say that, like, George Washington was he part of a church, right? But all the way he think was like it was just a front. Like he really wasn't a church member. He didn't really go. Like I said, those people back then really didn't go to church. They might have been affiliated with a particular church, but they didn't go to church. And it wasn't a big deal. And it was kind of like they were happy not to have to be under such scrutiny for their religious beliefs like they did in Europe. So people looking at this land as free, it was definitely open. And so I really don't so we really can't say that America was founded on Christianity, right? But anyhow, it says that altogether it is believed that about 9 out of 15 men that signed the Declaration were Mason, and about 13 of 39 that signed the U.S. Constitution were Masons. So that's kind of, I want to say that's kind of a significant amount. So he goes into, it's saying, however, what is known about the Freemasons and the Founding Fathers is what their political agenda was. Over the years, many scholars have tried to dig up stuff. Yeah, they have. It says Masons who were in the public eye, like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, did not openly connect their political views to their Masonic association. Without any concrete evidence of what the Masons believed, it has been left open to the speculation and interpretation of later Masons and historians. Now, I don't think it was also in the best interest for the Masonic thought to be openly connected, because even though they were going into a free age of thinking, a free thinking age, Christianity and the Catholicism hand was not far off. I feel like it was like, for example, you had a lot of people being burned in Salem, the Salem witch hunts. So even in America, you still had the Christians that, were, in my opinion, fanatical, that were around. So I think that it was much advised that they Freemasonry being something that was secret would be something that they really wouldn't discuss and talk a lot about, right? So they wouldn't try to make those connections. But those ideologies would play a part in how they set up the government. Okay. Now it says, um, a view that is shared by all that is that Masons during the Revolutionary period were the ones pushing for America to break away from Great Britain and become its own nation. James Brown wrote that about Ben Franklin. What influence Freemason may have had on the life and character of Benjamin Franklin can only be conjectured, but that it did influence him and his contemporaries in the great struggle for American independence seems beyond doubt. It seems that even if Masonry did not have a set standard of political view and agenda, all the men that chose to be part of it shared some common values and views. Like most of the founding fathers, the Freemasons from this time period were men way before their time, sharing views that many others during this time would not have shared or even understood. So, okay, so what they're really saying to you is that these new concepts that America had were not Christian. They weren't Christian. Okay, they were influenced by free thinking Masonics. See, to be a Christian back then was to just be a follower. It was to be obedient. And so these men, being looked at as revolutionary, one thing you got to understand that I don't think that we understand, that in order to break free, they had to break free of religion. That's important. It's just like when in Haiti, those Haitians had to break free of that religion that they were given in order to free themselves. It's the same thing with their own Albions. These Europeans had to free themselves from that religious dogma in order for them to free themselves. And so the fact that they use Masonic, Freemasonry, free thinking, it definitely, to me, it definitely wasn't religious. Okay, in the way that we understand religion. Okay, like I'm not saying that George Washington and whatnot didn't believe in God, but you can see in his quotes that he totally had an abstract concept of God, and that everybody's interpretation of God may be different. And he didn't even mention Christ. You see what I'm saying? Like, for the fact that shows me right there that like George Washington really wasn't on that religious stuff. He really wasn't on that religious stuff. Yo, peace to the God. You still hopefully. Oh, I see you on there. So, um, like I said, so basically, y'all hear what I'm saying, that America's history. I want to say American history is really based on Masonic history in a lot of ways. Like, they are few, but they are influential. And the thing about Freemason is it's so many, even some of the religious people, like what's his name, Joseph Smith. He was definitely a Freemason. So like even some of the religious organizations took Freemason stuff and brought it. Now, I want to say, if we go back to this article, right, we go see like, well, what happened? Like what made America Christian? And I'm gonna tell you something. It happened. It happened kind of in a couple ways, but you'll see like what even from 100 years ago, how people looked at Christianity 100 years ago versus now, or 50, or 50 years ago, where these things happen, right? So One of the things I always realized was this. This is what happened. Evangelical movements in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, okay, sent preachers out to Christianize the unorganized settlers, okay? So Christianity started to become more important in American history in the late 1800s, early 19th, early 18th and 19th centuries, okay? So 1800s is when you start to see a change, right? You see these evangelical movements coming in, okay? Um, their message of a democratic faith in which the poor, the uneducated, and even the fallen, not just the pre-elected elite, could someday sit at God's throne, brought an upstart Protestant movement such as what's this, Methodism, Baptism, and others like Mormonism, increasing success, right? So, like, I mean, because like Mormonism, all these started to come up in the 1800s, middle 1800s. So these movements began to spread a lot of time after. This is after the founding fathers had passed. Okay, it says later, over a course of the 19th century, middle class Americans in a great number found and joined churches. And by the 20th century, they made church going a norm. So by the 20th century, so we're talking about by the 1900s, importantly, it was around 1900, give or take a generation, that religious fundamentalism took form in reaction to the growing role of science. That old time religion, ironically, may be only about a century or so old. So they're saying that this old time religion, maybe 100 years. The normal religious life of many Americans seem to remember is the life of the 1950s, when church building and church attending boomed. Not coincidentally, along with the baby boom, huh? But it says those years were the peak of church membership and attendance in American history. Now, this is important because it unfolds a couple things. So, first of all, they're showing you that by the 1950s, Christianity had become the biggest thing. It had peaked. So what does that mean? In the 50s, it peaked. So after the 50s, Christianity has been in a decline. Okay. And I got a video where I discuss like the decline of Christianity and Western religions, right? But there was a decline after 1950s. Do you guys know like we're like they got the Ten Commandments and sitting in front of uh church, I mean like state buildings? You got like these church relics sitting in front of governmental buildings. And people think that that has always been there. But a lot of those things didn't come until the 1950s, 40s, 50s, when Christianity was at its height. They started putting the Ten Commandments in front of state operating things because Christianity had grown so big that the church state thing began to be a problem. Church and state weren't really as separate as they should be at this point, right? Now, we err, let's see. We err if we project the 1950 culture back to the early days of America. Listen, and we underestimate the accomplishment of legions of traveling ministers who eventually rural hollow rural hollow Christianized America. So America became Christianized because groups of people came in and did that. It wasn't like the people came here so Christian. And that's the point. that the American settlers, a lot of the original American settlers, and a lot of the original United States citizens were not Christian. They weren't. They were not really religious. They were, um, very relaxed in their religious beliefs. It says, for example, Michael Hout and I pointed out the growth since the 1990s in proportion of Americans who answered none when asked in surveys what religion they were. Some readers were led to cheer or to bemoan an increase in atheism and agnosticism. That is not what is happening. What we what may be on the rise is a reorientation away from standard organized religion. What many people mean by their answers of none is that they have no religion in particular, or that they prefer their spirituality outside the walls and rules of organized institution. And so what you're starting to see is they're going back to how America kind of started, where they had more emphasis on knowledge, science, trying to it's like the Europeans had got behind. Catholicism was so superstitious. You know, if you were doing anything out of order, you was considered a witch, a heretic, burned at the stake. They had to create secret societies to talk about the things that they couldn't talk about openly. And they used that philosophy and ideology and thinking when they came to the Americas. Another part of this that we don't really look at is the culture of America when they got here. When the Europeans got here, there were already people here, right? Let me get out of here. I'm gonna remove this. When the Europeans got here, they came when there were people already here, and those people were already practicing a form of spirituality. The founding fathers, being open minded as they were, did embrace a lot of Native American philosophy. Like the White House is based off the Longhouse in the Longhouse that the Native Americans use. So there is a lot of you know American Native American even spirituality, if you will, that could be kind of seen in America already. So when they get here, it's like, okay, we're pretty open to whatever you guys are practicing. We don't really have any standard way of life. That is what you find. So for us to think that America is a Christian nation or that it was, I find that to be inaccurate. I find that to be very inaccurate. Um, Let me see. So, y'all got any questions? Right? Y'all got any questions? Anything? Like I say right here, I should have put that up, but like basically Christianity was dominant religion, right? But most people didn't go to church in the 1700s. Like the thing about it is, y'all, is that they wipe out our memories like every 20, 30 years. Like they kind of reset what is right, they reset history and then they represent it to us. Um, like we don't really know what happened 1930s. Like the people of 1930 had a different set of values than we do today. You got certain movements like the LBGTQ community that kind of have shaped society in a different format even today. So when we look at history and we start looking at things now, they're taking stuff out of the history books. They're taking things out of the library, right? So when people start to look, they're not there. So they're reshaping history. They're always reshaping history. And so because the Christian movement became so dominant, I feel like because that happened, there was a rewriting of history, if you will. And you can see it. I mean, like you can see a change of policies. Even when you look at Roe versus Wade, Roe v. Wade, right? That is based on a very Christian principle, right? That is pushed by, the conservatives pushing that. It is said it was conservative constitutionalists that basically wanted to get rid of that federal law. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying that religion and this morality does shape the way that we think, right? I was watching a video earlier, and the brother was talking about how the church basically tried to wipe away the division between church and state. See, for the church, it is not in its best interest so that it think. The church would rather have control over the state. Okay. Now, I'm gonna get a little deeper philosophically, right? If you really want to do some work, if you really want to do something, church and state can be used to your advantage because church and state are two separate jurisdictions. And so creating a church, you can create your own government in that church. That is separate from the state. So the state don't really have jurisdiction over this state that you create. That is what some people have learned to do. While you got some who would rather take over or work in the politics of government, right? Like I talked about this the other night, but it's the guys who do the breakfast every year. That secret society Christian group, they're working with politics. They have people in there to try to have control over politics. And that's cool. But I'm saying church and state can be used as church is a separate entity in creating its own church. It's like Moorish Science Temple of America, or like what the Catholic Church did, where they created this religious corporation and created their own government within that. Okay. So there are people who have thought about how to use church and state to their advantage, right? Which is what the government wants. The government's like, hey, we're giving you the ability to create religious organizations or religious institutions that give you some type of, I'm going to say sovereignty, if you will, give you some kind of autonomy, if you will. So when the church and state happened, you see all these people starting to pop up, all these denominations starting to pop up in the United States. You could create your own religious institution. And with that religious institution, you could have control. So that was one of the ways. That's for me. It wasn't necessarily about the United States trying to Christianize the United States, but it was more about people becoming aware of the ability of having a church and what you could do with a church. Okay. What you can do with one. And that's still going on today, even though the government has like put some type of clamping on it with the 501c3s or whatnot. But truthfully, the church can be used as a separate entity to do stuff. It can be used as like I said, as its own state. Because you can create your own like leadership, contractual agreements with the members. You got your own bylaws. You got your own constitution. It's very similar to having your own nation. And that's what I'm saying. Like Noble Drew Ali, like I think he was one of, I want to say he was one of the first back in 1920s, right? He did that. Like 1928. So I think that we got to really look at church and state from a different perspective. We need to look at religion from a different perspective. We really need to like understand how to use religious power to our advantage. A lot of times we have given up and abandoned the word religion. The word religion means to tie back, right? In Latin, to tie back to something. But we look at religion in a negative way where we say religion is what kept us down. And that's true, but not the word religion. It's like there are religions that have been used against us, but we haven't used religion for ourselves to empower us. Okay? I don't think that we use the religious tool that has been given to us even through the First Amendment. The ability to use religion to protect you, to create your own system of record, everything. All the things that they used to do in the church had those powers. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you go back, like I talk about this in one of my books, but if you go back to the 1800s, when churches were starting to pop up more, the church was in charge of your birth certificate. Like you would get a birth record, a baptismo from the church, and it would be the church would record that information or have it on record, right? You would use that religious document to verify your birth. And so we've gotten away from that. We got the state doing all that now. We got the state of whatever, Ohio, the state of wherever you live. They're the ones that take care of that now. So your local church don't do that. Your community don't do that. The state does these things now. And so what I'm saying is these things have we've lost some kind of power to the state. The church has lost some powers to the state. So, you know, I'm just trying to break some stuff down to y'all. You know, we just got to look at religion from a different perspective. We got to stop looking at religion from Christian perspective. I mean, personally, we need to stop looking at religion as a people from a Western Abrahamic perspective, if you will. But even if you are using it from that perspective, it's like, how are you using the Bible or any of those things to protect you right now? Like, how are you using it? And it's not many of us is using it that way. How many people are using their religious books to protect them from COVID or protect them from having to do certain things in the government? It's not many. It's like, y'all notice, like, okay, for example, a religious organization like a Muslim woman, she go take her picture at the BMV for her driver's license, she can have her whole face covered up. As a Muslim woman, she can have her whole face covered up on the picture because it's part of her religious belief. But now you try to go do that, Mary Jane. Uh, go kind of go let Becky go in there and try to cover her face with some kind of veil without saying that she's a Muslim or have some kind of religious belief. They go tell her that she can't take that picture. It's just like if you got a something on your head. I got a fez that be on my head. That's a religious piece. It's a religious head piece. So they can't tell me to take it off. And so that's what it kind of mean by having that religious barrier between the law. Okay, so man, it's late. You know, we on a late night thing, and I'm not trying to go all the way into it with y'all, but you know, please like the video, subscribe, share the video, share, man, share. Sharing is caring. You know what I mean? And check out all the rest of the videos. Check out the books. Check it out. Check it out. So that's really all I got to say, y'all, man. So I'm a skedaddle out of here. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I'm gonna